train hard, you'll not only be hard, but you'll be hard to beat. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Sports for Champions podcast. Today I am joined by Paralympics GB's Hope Gordon. How are you today, Hope?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and I believe you've actually brought a special guest for our first appearance on the podcast. I believe we have Storm.
We do. We've got my little Spaniel who we've only had for 4 weeks.
Oh wow.
But she's come in to do the podcast with me.
Brilliant. Shall we see if she wants to say hello for a podcast debut?
1, 2, 3, wee. There we go.
Hello. Hi Storm. Storm? Have you gone shy now, Storm? There we go. She wouldn't stop talking before, and now she's gone a little bit shy.
She's gone camera shy.
So, hope you compete in paracanoeing and Nordic skiing. Can you tell us a little bit about paracanoeing and about what that entails?
Yep, so in paracanoe we compete over 2 different boats. So a kayak where you have a double-sided paddle and you paddle left, right. And then a boat called a va as well, which is a form of canoe. And you have a single-sided paddle and you paddle on one side. And both of those boats, we compete over a 200-metre distance. So it's very much a sprint event, and I compete in both of the boats.
Wow, that's amazing. It must be difficult jumping between 2 different sort of variations of the same sport. Is it virtually the same thing, or are they a bit different?
They're very different, yeah. So the va's a lot newer to me than the kayak. I've been doing the kayak for a few years now. They're very different, but a lot of it is like understanding kind of the boat and how it moves and stuff. So once you get your head around it, it's not too bad.
So I know you've not actually been competing for too long. I believe you were only 14 when you were diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey surrounding that? Yeah,
so kind of long story short, I basically went to school one day as a 12-year-old, pretty much fine, and for whatever reason, whilst I was at school, my leg just stopped working. And at the time, I obviously just thought I had a sore leg and it was going to get better overnight. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and it took a long time to get a diagnosis. It took probably about a year. I would just kind of go to the doctors, and every doctor I would see would diagnose me with something different to the point where nobody actually knew what was wrong with me. And then it wasn't until I got referred down to York Hill Children's Hospital in Glasgow to see a specialist down there that he did eventually diagnose me. And yeah, I always remember the day that I got the diagnosis, and I was so happy because I felt like for a year like nobody knew what was wrong with me. Doctors and nurses and medical professionals were kind of starting to tell me that it was all in my head, which is obviously horrible to hear when you know it's not. So when I finally had like a name to what was wrong with me, it was like a massive relief. And then the doctor said, like, this is what's wrong with you, but don't Google it. But of course the first thing you do is you go home and you Google it, and then you sort of quickly realise like, oh, it's good that I've got a diagnosis, but it's not a great one to have.
No, of course. And I believe sort of leading up to that, you were really sporty and actually competing in swimming, I think.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland. So yeah, just spent loads of time outside, around lots of animals, not very many people. So yeah, I kind of grew up as quite an average, active, like young person. Really did lots of different sports. Wasn't particularly good at any of them. Was just a bit average, really. And then obviously when something quite dramatic happens and things change overnight, I couldn't do a lot of the sports I did beforehand, and the only one that I could continue to do was to swim, because I could just swim using my arms. So yeah, I just kept on swimming, and I always remember when para-swimming, disability swimming was first kind of mentioned to me, and sorry. I just remember saying like, oh, I haven't got a disability, my leg just doesn't work, because it was still quite early on, and like I still thought I just had a sore leg. But then I sort of went and tried para-swimming with a bit of an open mind, and Like, it's amazing what an open mind can lead you to, and that's kind of how my para journey started, really.
That's amazing. It must have been quite difficult, obviously. You're going from being a fairly typical young girl who's, you know, out playing and trying different sports and things like that. What do you think it is that pushed you into trying swimming out when obviously you were struggling with your leg and stuff? Is there anything special you think that pushed you to do that?
I think the water just always gave me a massive sense of freedom, because my leg was getting worse and worse and worse, and, you know, I couldn't walk at all. On land, I had to use crutches, I had to use a wheelchair to get around. But in the pool, I could just get around just my arms, like pretty much the same as I used to be able to when I had working legs. You know, apart from the fact that I just had to swim with my arms instead of my full body. But my legs were never very good at swimming anyway, so it was kind of the same anyway. So I think it was just the sense of freedom, really, that I really liked. And then once I got, like, I didn't know anything about parasport, like absolutely nothing. But once I kind of tried it and went to competitions and met people, you suddenly realise that these people are like the loveliest people ever. It's such a friendly environment, so welcoming, and actually I was like, this is such like a privilege to be part of.
And did you know much about canoeing before you kind of found out about the para scene?
No, nothing. Like, I remember I was actually on the train to Nottingham for an assessment with British Canoeing, and I didn't know the difference between canoeing and kayaking, and I had to Google it, and I was like, I'm not actually sure which one I'm going to be doing.
That's amazing. Can you tell us a bit about how that assessment day came about?
Yeah, so I'm friends with a girl on the team called Charlotte Henshaw. She used to swim. I think she went to 3 Paralympics of swimming. And then after Rio Paralympics in 2016, she changed from swimming to canoeing. And then it was 2016 that I had my leg amputated as well. So not long after that, she shared an advert that British Canoeing were looking for new talent athletes. And I just saw it and thought, well, it looks like fun and I'd like to give it a go. And until I had my leg amputated, I was quite restricted. I couldn't really try different sports. And then suddenly, like, I had my amputation and it was so much better and I could try new things. So yeah, I just went down to Nottingham for an assessment and it went well.
That's amazing. And then do you remember, so obviously with your amputation it actually kind of freed you up a little bit. Was it almost like a sense of relief when that happened?
Oh, like the biggest relief ever. It was such like a really difficult journey to the day that I got my leg amputated. I actually was fighting for that operation for about 5.5 years.
Wow.
So from when I was 16 was when I first asked the doctor to consider amputation, and I was actually 21 by the time it happened. Yeah, it was a really, really difficult journey, and I think, like, for lots and lots of different reasons. And then as well, so my operation was supposed to happen like January 2016, and it didn't happen until August 2016. So, and in that time frame, it got postponed 7 times, to the point where I was like in my car ready to go to the hospital, and you get a phone call the day beforehand to say it's not happening. So that was like probably the most, out of the nearly 10 years of kind of struggling with my leg, the last sort of 6-7 months was the hardest, because you sort of get your head around, like, you get psychologically around the fact that you're having this operation, then it doesn't happen. And yeah, the moment I woke up and knew that it actually happened, it was just a massive relief.
That's amazing. And then how long before you were down doing your assessment in Nottingham?
I think I first went down there, it must have been the December of that year, or the year after. Must have been the year after. Yeah, so yeah, certainly within the first 2 years, I was off having my leg off. I was down and training pretty much full time with the team.
That's amazing. And how was the adjustment from going from swimming to canoeing? Obviously, completely different set of muscles, different skill. Did it take a while to adjust or to learn the technique?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah, obviously our sprint kayak's quite a wobbly boat. It's quite long and quite thin, so is a bit of an adjustment learning to be on the water instead of in the water. I did spend some time in the water, not through choice. But yeah, once you kind of have a few wobbles and a few capsizes, you soon kind of learn the limits of the boat and stuff. It was very different, I think, especially once I moved down to Nottingham to train full time. I sort of went from, like, before that I was at uni in Edinburgh, I was working in Edinburgh, I was swimming, I was trying to learn a new sport, so I was doing like so many things at once. And then I moved down to Nottingham and I was just training, so it was really nice kind of having time and just doing one thing and trying to just put everything into it and get better. And I think training in the setup that we've got within our team at British Canoeing is amazing. The fact that we all train together and it's such a high performance, like, world leading team, you sort of learn from the other athletes, and there's so much experience around that it really sped up my progress, I think.
You said earlier on that you don't think you were particularly sporty growing up. Obviously, I mean, kind of beg to differ. You've done so much, obviously, in sport already. Did you think, obviously you were picked up straight away after your assessment by Paralympics GB. What do you think it is in you that they saw that made them pick you up straight away?
I think I don't really give up very much or very easily. I'd say I'm quite resilient, and I think a lot of that is down to being in hospital so much and everything going wrong with my leg and pretty much nothing going right in hospital for nearly 10 years. So I think I don't really realise at the time, but I think that's actually been really useful for my sporting career, because I think, when you grow up and things don't go right, but you kind of keep pushing through it, that is kind of like what sport's all about. So I think they probably saw a bit of that, and I don't know, somebody saw a bit of talent in me, so I got to cling on to that.
Yeah, I think probably more than a bit. And can you remember sort of first getting into your stride, and do you remember the first sort of like moments of realising that this is what you're going to be doing and you're going to do it professionally?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just such a amazing position to be in. Like, I love sport, and the fact that I can actually now do that as a full-time job and make a career out of it, it's just like a massive bonus. And when it's the winter and it's freezing cold and you're soaking wet coming off the water, it can be a bit miserable, but then it's like, well, I'd rather do that than be sitting in an office 9 to 5. So it's like super, super lucky. And then you've got, in springtime, like I love seeing all the ducks out on the water. I love to have my daily chats with the ducks. My teammates think I'm mental, but it's just amazing seeing, sort of being outside, and it can be good and bad at the same time, because you can have like massive winds and horrible weather, but you can also have like just an amazing day outside, and it's like such an honour to be able to do that on a day-to-day basis and then go and represent your country doing it.
Yeah, so you've had quite a bit of success representing your country recently. Can you tell us about the World Championships over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so I guess my first international medals were last year at World Championships 2021. We picked up 2 silvers, so silver in the kayak and a silver in the VA. And then this year I had a bit of a battle at the Worlds, to be honest. In my kayak, I basically had an issue with my boat in the final, and actually had to stop and paddle for 4 strokes on the one side, which obviously in a 200-metre race,
not ideal, no.
You've not got any room for error. So I came 4th, which was very frustrating, because I knew that I had so much more in me and I could have done so much better, but unfortunately in an equipment sport, sometimes your equipment goes wrong, and that went wrong for me when it kind of really did matter. So yes, it was, I think there was 1.08 seconds between gold and me coming 4th, and I know that I stopped for more than 1.08 seconds.
Yeah,
so that was very frustrating, but I think as well, for this winter I'm going to kind of have a bit more fire in my belly than I would have if that race went really well. But I also managed to pick up a silver again in the VA at Worlds this year, and I got a silver and a bronze at Europeans as well.
There you go. So in over a couple of years period, it's not bad going.
No.
I would say that would be good for anyone doing one sport, but you've kind of added to that and picked up a whole nother sport on top of it. Can you tell us a little bit about Nordic skiing and how that came about?
Yes. So I've got a friend, Scott Mina, who has been doing Nordic skiing for quite a while now, and he's always said to me that he thinks that I would really enjoy it and that I should just give it a try. And then I sort of always said like I would at some point, but I just thought it was going to be quite a bit further down the line. And then I was basically this time last year, so actually 3 days after coming back from Worlds last year for canoeing, that was when I first tried skiing. So it was a bit like crazy going from being like quite good at one sport to a complete beginner at a different sport. But yeah, I was just given an amazing opportunity to try Nordic skiing, and for what I originally thought was just going to be some cross training to benefit my boats, ended up being like quite a bit more. And I got the opportunity to kind of train and race all over the place over the winter last year, and then that ended up with me going to Beijing to the Winter Paralympics, where I was the first ever female to represent Paralympics GB in Nordic skiing.
That's incredible. Wow. And do you remember your first sort of adjustment period while you were getting used to the skiing? I mean, obviously there's some incredible locations and things that come with it, but it is quite a tough and taxing sport.
Yeah, so I didn't know very much about cross-country skiing whatsoever. I thought it was completely flat, and I don't know, I just thought it was flat and you just sort of skied round in a circle or something, I don't know. And then I went to a ski tunnel in Germany. That was my first time on snow, and I got there and I was like, why is there hills? And they were like, you really don't know anything about this sport, do you? So quickly, sorry. I quickly learned that you have to go uphill, downhill and on flat for cross-country skiing. And I think the kind of what I would say, like, I sort of thought about the sport in two separate bits. So you've got to be fit and you've got to be strong is like one side of it. But then there's the other side of it is like a massive technical bit where you have to go round corners and kind of jump in and out the tracks and things like that, which I just was totally foreign for me. So I think the actual skiing part was okay, and I think I picked that up relatively quickly. But in terms of turning around corners, because it's sit skiing as well, so you've got to use your whole body weight. Obviously I'm not used to leaning to the side when I'm in a boat because you just fall in the water. So yeah, it was very, very, very different, but it was also so much fun as well, so it was good.
Amazing. And then obviously travelling out to Beijing is there's quite a lot of disruption with the tournament itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was quite an experience, going to China and compete in in a COVID games as well. Yeah. You know, it was quite it was interesting. We actually started the trip with one of our teammates testing positive for COVID on the last PCR test that we had to do before we were allowed to travel. So I spent the first 5 days stuck in a hotel at Paris airport, not knowing if we're actually going to make it to Beijing or not. So it was an experience and a half. We did get to go to Beijing, and we actually, the whole team managed to make it, which I don't think we thought was going to happen at lots of points. But no, it was an amazing opportunity, and it was nice to go to games where performance didn't really matter as such, because I knew I wasn't going to be the best skier in the world, because by the point I got to Beijing I'd been on snow for 10 weeks, and I was competing against girls that have been doing it for 10 years type thing. So I was very realistic in that, and I think I tried to tell people that as well, because I think people think that you go to this games and you're automatically going to win a medal. It doesn't work like that whatsoever. But it was like just such an amazing opportunity, and yeah, it was just, I never thought my first games was going to be in skiing. Yeah, of course. But it was like so cool.
Is there any big takeaways from competing against people at that level? I mean, it must be almost unheard of for somebody to take to a sport that quickly to end up representing the country at the Paralympic Games, having, like you say, 10 weeks. Was there any big standouts, or did you take anything away from the people you were competing against?
I think it's just amazing to be able to compete against those girls. I mean, so I competed in the sprint race and the middle distance, which was a 7.5 kilometre race, which was the first one of them I'd ever done, was at the Games. The longest I'd done before that was 5k. And I remember just like absolutely like dying in this 7.5k race. It was the weather had warmed up quite a bit, so the snow was like mashed tatties. That's how I kind of said.
Mashed potatoes for our English listeners.
Yeah, mashed potatoes, mashed tatties. So it was horrible. And some of the girls that actually like know a lot more about the sport, the time of that race was equivalent to about 15k because the snow was so slow.
Oh wow!
And I remember just like dying in this race. I genuinely didn't think I was going to be able to finish it. And like some of these girls were just flying past me, and I was like, how are they doing that? But I think on the other side of that, it was really nice to just go to Games with no pressure at all, which was amazing. And I think having had the experience from Beijing, hopefully that's put me in better stead for hopefully Paris.
That's amazing. So obviously such a quick turnaround from first being on snow. You must have a physical sort of talent for these kind of things, but obviously you're a very hard-working person and overcoming obstacles that are put in front of you. How do you see the roles of talent and hard work sort of playing off against each other? I
think talent is something that generally you're born with almost, or you kind of grow up with, and I think you can have a bit of talent, but if you don't have the hard work to go with it, you're not going to get anywhere. So I would say I've got a bit of talent, but my hard work kind of outweighs the amount of talent that I would say I'd have. So yeah, I think you can have the hard work and not necessarily that much talent, but you can't have the talent and if you don't work hard.
Yeah, that 1 second. Yeah, that makes sense. And how often are you training at the moment?
So I train 6 days a week and normally 2 to 3 sessions a day.
Wow.
Well, Monday to Friday, and then Saturday we just have 1 session. And that's a mixture of in the gym and on the water. Yeah.
And then you are presumably in your off season from canoeing, then you're doing skiing. Is that just going to go back to back now forever? Or?
So I'm actually probably not going to ski until after Paris.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd definitely want to ski again, but Paris is actually only just around the corner. Our qualification year is the next World Champs, so World Champs in August. So that's when we have to qualify the boats, which is then the start of the process to get to Paris. So yeah, I think I'm going to put all my eggs in the one basket for the next couple of years and focus on 2 boats.
Yeah, just the 2 boats, yeah. And you will be obviously one of the few athletes from this country to represent the country in both the winter and summer games, which obviously would be incredible.
Yeah, like amazing. Like it's obviously not something I ever thought was going to happen, but it's really cool.
So there's so much training, 6 times a week, multiple sessions per day. How is your nutrition in order to fuel the engine for all that training?
I have lots of porridge, always Scottish oats. My teammates always take the mick out of me because I think Scottish oats make you faster.
Nice.
Just lots of food. I love vegetables. I eat so many vegetables. I have quite a high protein diet as well. So yeah, it's just kind of feeling right and enough really.
Would you say you've made a lot of sacrifices to get where you are in terms of your sport?
I wouldn't really say sacrifices because I think I've been given so many more opportunities than I ever would have had if I didn't do sport. But obviously there are things that I kind of miss out on, and you know, I obviously moved down to England away from my family to train full time. So like sometimes it can be hard because I don't really get to see my family very much. I don't get to go back home that much, but it's more like a choice. Like I could go back home more, but then that's going to have a knock-on effect on my training and then ultimately like racing and stuff like that. So I think it's only really a sacrifice if you look at it as a sacrifice. But I think as well you do need to have a good balance between not just sport, because then it can just get a bit too much, and I think if it gets too much, you're not going to perform well. So I am quite aware that I do try and have a bit of a balance to have things outside of sport as well as being able to focus fully on sport.
Makes sense. Yeah, that brings me on quite nicely to my next question. Do you think that the life of a professional athlete is tough compared to maybe some other professions?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think it's different, that's for sure. I think one of the things that's maybe a bit tougher for us is that it's basically a 24/7 job. You know, if you don't sleep enough, that's going to have an impact on what you do. If you don't eat right, if you don't eat enough, that's going to have an impact. But equally, you know, we're not on the front line. We're not like saving lives and stuff like that. So I don't know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But, you know, if somebody's working a 9-to-5 job and then can leave their work at work and not think about it again for the next day, you know, I don't do that. There's very few like hours go past that I don't think about what I'm doing, and I should be doing this and I should be doing that, and I need to get to bed at this time, and I need to stretch because I've got this session coming up tomorrow, and if I don't do this now, it's going to impact that and stuff like that. So you are kind of always like on it.
Makes sense. And did you have a favourite sporting hero growing up?
Not really. I've never really had like one specific person that I've looked up to. I think I've looked up to different people for different reasons. So like, for example, Catherine Granger, I think, is an amazing.
Who's Catherine Granger?
Catherine Granger is a Scottish rower who is well known for always getting silver at the Olympics, and then in London she got that gold, and it was always that kind of story of like never giving up and being resilient, and I think she's a great role model for certainly female athletes and all athletes. And then as well, just more like my granny. My granny sadly passed away recently, but she's like a real example to me of being resilient as well, and really working hard. You know, her lifestyle is very different to most people's lifestyle, but the way she brought up like 6 kids and stuff and just to be such a hard worker and such an amazing person, like I think you can take inspiration and like from more than kind of famous sports people. Like sometimes they're a lot closer to home.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And do you have any advice for a young person maybe looking to start a career in sport, or maybe sort of paracanoeing in particular?
I'd say just say yes and just do it. I think for me, like for example, my Nordic opportunities, if I just didn't say yes to that, none of that would have happened. So I think a lot of the time it's actually pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and saying yes to opportunities and just taking what you can get, and if the opportunities don't come themselves, then, you know, don't be scared to go looking for them.
Yeah, I think that's amazing advice. I think that you're inspirational. I think to all the people watching at home, and definitely a credit to your granny too. Thank you very much for joining us today, Hope. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And thank you to everyone at home watching. This has been the Sports for Champions podcast, and we'll see you next time. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, be sure to leave us a like and a subscribe, and check out all our other videos for some more great interviews and content. Bye.